for me, I like to invest. I mean, it's no secret. I like to invest, right? And I think that's where you really build wealth, right?
I think pivoting is important, and taking some level of risk is also important. That risk that you're taking is going to pay off.
I think I've always been interested in making money, and for me, it's really because I didn't really have much growing up.
Yeah.
It only mattered when post-university I wanted to get a Sony tablet, went to the shop, failed the credit check, and that embarrassment kind of led me to, okay, so you need to change your way.
Hey guys, I go by the name of Adrian Daniels. Welcome to the Sound of Accra podcast. This is the show where we speak with top entrepreneurs, creatives, founders from a Ghanaian background and interests, with the aim of leaving you behind in meaningful takeaways that you can apply in your life, business, and career. For today's show notes, I'd like you to head over to thesoundofaccra.com/Ato. That's ATO. Thesoundofaccra.com/Ato for all of today's links, references, resources, and nuggets. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment below, let us know what you think of today's episode. A 5-star review is very much appreciated if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, and all the podcasting platforms. All right, so I think that's housekeeping out the way. Guys, look who's in the studio. Look who's in the studio. Wow.
Crazy.
Ato from Savvy Wallet. I'm sure you guys have been watching Savvy Wallet. Some of you may have seen Savvy Wallet. You guys are thinking, he's Nigerian. What are you doing on the show? He's Nigerian. But he went to Ghana. You went to Ghana last year you went to Ghana?
It was last year, August, yeah.
Time has flown by.
I know.
Ato, thanks for coming on, bro.
Welcome, bro. It's a pleasure. We've been. I know this has been in the making for a while, but I'm glad to come on your podcast because you came on mine. So,
absolutely, I had to return the favor. I really did. But of course, nevertheless, you're my friend now. So I think we've formed a relationship on the back of London podcast show. Not this year, but last year.
Last year's one, yes. And it's grown a lot, right? Especially our relationship. We talk a lot about, how the podcast space is changing, how we see ourselves in it. And I think a lot has changed in 2 years. I would say a lot has changed for me in this year. A lot has changed.
It has.
And I'm only just excited for more in the future as well. So
it has. A lot has changed for you, especially when that episode of you and Benedicta. Is it Benedicta or
Benedicta? Yeah.
When that went 500,000 views, oof,
I know.
I remember being in Ghana seeing. I was like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Is someone messing with the numbers? Is someone manipulated the numbers? Election fraud. What's happening? What's going on? But guys, if you don't know Ato, he's senior tech consultant and is the host of Savvy Wallet podcast, where he interviews the top minds in business, finance, mindset, and more. We will leave a link below in the description and in the show notes for more information about his podcast. You can go watch, subscribe, listen to it, all of that good stuff. So of course you may have heard we met at the podcast show last year, the London podcast show, and then of course we've gone to form a friendship. On top of that, Ato went to Ghana. Ato, you know what? Tell me about your trip to Ghana. I know you weren't there for too long, but I think, but you mentioned that you see a lot of potential out there, and it's a place really that you feel you can thrive. Talk to me, bro.
Well, I think that you know what? So I went to Ghana last year, August, for my friend's wedding. Yeah. So I went to 2 places in Ghana. So we got to Accra first, and we were there for about, from memory, a week. So we did a few kind of excursions. We did the tree. What was it? Tree walk. Oh my God! I don't like heights.
National Park. Really?
Yeah, I don't like heights. So that was terrifying. That must have
terrified you.
It was, and it was raining.
I'm surprised you persevered, because some people would have chicken. Some people
did chicken out. That's the crazy thing. Some people on the trip did chicken out. Yeah. But I mean, look, I'm with my wife, so you got to do
the macho. You got to be the alpha male.
You got to do it. Do you know what I mean? Because she's not scared of heights. So I'm like, how am I looking like she's walking and I'm, you know what I mean? I'm just like, but don't get it twisted. My ankles were shaking, man, like something out of like a cartoon, and but it was very beautiful, so landing at Accra, we landed there, and we stayed not in the center of Accra, but we stayed a little bit on the outskirts. So I think it was like a maybe 15-20 minute taxi ride.
That's not too bad
into Accra, so it was all right. We went to the shopping malls. Oh, what's the shopping mall called?
Which the main one, Accra Mall? Or
No,
was
the
it
other one, the South African
South
one.
African ones?
It's a South, not mall, South
Okay.
African shop.
South African shop.
It's a big one. Oh my God. I'm gonna
Oh,
have
a
to go
shop.
and
Was it ShopRite? Was it Game?
ShopRite.
ShopRite, the supermarket. Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
because so we went to ShopRite, right? And
Uh-huh.
I think that was
ShopRite.
my
I
first
like that.
time ever
ShopRite, right? That's what you just did.
ShopRite, right? Yeah, so we went there, and it's quite cool because it's like basically like an Asda for here. So it's
Essentially.
quite different, like to
Yeah.
see something like that. But
Yeah.
I think for me, Ghana, what I really liked about it was that I felt very safe there. It was very safe. People so friendly, very absolutely friendly, and I've gone to other places. I'm not gonna mention, not even in Africa. I've just mean just generally where people will ask you for money. In Ghana, never happened, and I was
No.
like, this is crazy.
Really? You never had someone approach you for money?
Not really.
Lucky.
No,
I think they just
not
knew.
really.
They just knew you weren't one of us, man.
No.
As soon as they get out of the airports, they want money. They want something. Can you give me something
Is
small?
it?
Yes. If you're in the car, they might try
That's
and beg.
crazy. You know what? Maybe I was too like,
I don't
because
know.
the thing is, I travel a lot, so yeah, okay, you could kind of tell that. I'm from the UK or I don't live in Africa,
That's
but
the whole
I know
point.
how to blend in though.
That's the
I
whole
can't
point. They
lie.
smell money if you're from the UK. They smell it. Oh, Brata, come on. They smell it.
I know how to blend in, man. Trust me. I'm like, look, like I know how to blend in. I like blending in. I like, enjoying the culture. But yeah, no, I just felt like it was very safe and there's a lot of, like a lot to do. Like, well, from in terms of clubs, partying, the buildings were amazing, the architecture was amazing, electricity was stable. Do you know what I mean? Like,
You're lucky because now they're having issues.
is it?
Yeah, they're having issues now.
Look, I mean, they got to somewhere, right? So they got to somewhere. So that tells me that you can kind of get there. So I feel like that kind of infrastructure really it kind of enables you to be able to build off it. Like, okay, so I spoke to a few people there, right? And they kind of say, oh, like, there's not a lot of opportunities and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I feel like when things are so difficult at the difficulty, I feel like that's the best time for opportunity. That's where if there's a problem, figure out how to solve it, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, well, you've got the infrastructure, there's a stable electricity, great internet, people are friendly, right? It's safe. To me, okay, that's the backbone of starting something, right? So why not think about a business that can solve some of the problems? So some of what people were saying to me was, oh, we can't, there's not enough jobs. Okay, create jobs, right? That's how I would think, right? I'm an optimistic person. Think about how can you create jobs, right? Like if you think, okay, this sector's not working, well, lean into the sector that's going to be working. There's going to be something somewhere, and it's just about thinking about it, So yeah, I'm very big on that. I'm very big on being optimistic. I'm very big on if there's a problem, you go and solve it. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of opportunity in Ghana, and I really liked it. For me, I was like, yeah, like I could definitely see myself living there. I can definitely see myself, setting up a business there. So yeah,
Well, you've got an entrepreneur mindset
yeah,
because that's what you need to thrive in Ghana. Because Ghana, when it comes to jobs, usually they give the jobs to people that they want to favor, usually, or maybe it's hard for you to get a job. But if you're coming with a mindset of creating jobs or creating your own business, then you're more likely to thrive because if you're just going to rely on opportunities being given to you in Ghana, then it's not always going to be the case. So you have to think about opportunities that you can create because of the way the country is.
yeah,
So yeah, I think you got an entrepreneurial mindset. Of course, that comes from you, being who you are and running the podcast that you have, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So yeah, I think I can see you thriving in Ghana because you've got the determination, especially as you crossed Kakum National Park, even though you're scared of heights, you have that determination despite all the
I don't know
odds.
if I'll go again, man. But yeah, it's not even just
Once
for
is
me.
enough, man.
I
Once is
think for
enough.
even the people listening that are in Ghana, I would say that, if it's like something where you feel like there's no opportunities, I would just say encourage you to create those opportunities for yourself. I think it's very important. I think if you think about a lot of like entrepreneurs, that's what they did, right? Like they create opportunities out of almost nothing. So I was watching a film of Martha Stewart with my wife yesterday on Netflix, right? It's a great film. And it was about her ups and downs, right? And again, I don't want to like spoil it, but if you saw, so she kind of she was one of those kind of people that did a cooking show, right? So if you say, okay, cooking show, how can you kind of evolve that into a business? But she managed to, right? She managed to evolve that into magazines. She managed to evolve that into just more than a show. Do you get what I'm trying to say, right? So I think these things are possible. It's just about trying, and it's about thinking outside of the box. Really, I think it's very important to be able to do that, and also being brave when other people are not really, people might not play in a certain space. That doesn't mean that there's no opportunity there, right? Like, and I use my journey as that, because again, in podcasting, and I'm sure you feel the same, right? Like, sometimes just because somebody's not in that space doesn't mean that there's no opportunity. You might just need to be the first, right? And I think you have to be brave to be the first. You have to be quite resilient, so yeah.
No, I think pivoting is important, and taking some level of risk is also important, and being brave to be able to take that risk, and being optimistic, as we talked about before, that, that risk that you're taking is going to pay off. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Let's go to the podcast, as you mentioned there. Let's double tap on that, Ato. So, your podcast, I know it focuses on business people, finance, and mindset. And I've seen you pivot your podcast a little bit, because now I can see now you're more focused on wealth creation, finance, and then mindset. Whereas before it was a little bit varied in terms of the kind of guests you're getting on. So now I think you've kind of got yourself in a good little niche, and now as a result, you're paying off from that.
Yeah.
I want you to talk me through some of the guests that you've had on. So in terms of like the tips some of the best tips that you've got from guests in terms of, these areas, like wealth creation, running a business, and then also personal finance.
Yeah.
And then I think we'll probably go into some of your personal experience. Hey, Global Ghanaian citizens, I hope you're enjoying this episode. It's just a very quick announcement. Now, we've managed to secure a very special offer in partnership with our guests and our partners. Now, the offer we have for today is in the link in the description below. So if you're watching on YouTube, or if you listen to podcast players, you'll find it in the link below. Please do take advantage of the offer, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Thank you. You as a person, like aside of the podcast.
Okay, yeah. So I think one of my most watched episodes. So with Andrew, so he is the author of a book called How to Own the World, and I had read that book before I had interviewed him, right? And I thought, oh, you know what? Let me reach out to him. And then the funny thing is, we had been speaking before we had done the podcast, maybe 3-4 months before we had that organized.
Yeah.
So, behind the scenes, some people don't see like what it kind of takes to kind of get some of these kind of interviews, but he's a great guy. And it was a great conversation. And really with him, the premise of what I wanted to get across with that episode was the fact that, anybody can invest, anybody can kind of build wealth, and that actually a lot of the people in the UK were not building wealth. And I've got some stats that I want to talk about, right?
Please do.
And really, what he was kind of saying in that podcast was that, when you invest, you're actually investing in human progress, right? So if you look at any of the kind of progress that we have right now, one of the buzzwords is AI, right? That's a big, progress for us, right? Before it was smartphones, before that it was the internet. We've had so many progresses in, human history, boats, planes, for example. And he's saying that by getting involved in that, you're able to take a share of the wealth, right? Because as we progress and we build all these products and services, right, they're making money. So why not be involved in that? And a lot of people are missing out on that. I would say, in my stats, right, is about 90%, 96% actually of people, are missing out on that, right? So it's they're missing out on being able to build wealth, and it's much more easier than it was before. In the past, it was, you had to know somebody, right? You had to know a stockbroker, they'll make the call. Now we have apps. You can invest from as little as £1. So really the advice from him was, you can invest very small, 10, 15, £20 per month, and then that will grow over time. And yes, maybe that's not a lot right now, but as your wage increases, you're able to invest more. So actually, maybe in year one you're investing £10 a month. Maybe in year five it's 1,000 because your income has gone up over that. And by doing that, you're also able to take advantage of compounding, right? Which really takes effect, over a long period of time. So that was the main message with Andrew, and how you kind of do that, how you kind of capture human progress, as he was saying, is you own the world. That's what his book's about, how to own the world. So and there's various ways of how you can own the world from an investing point of view. So those are things like global funds. Oh, it's great. It's great because it's a truth when you're investing in things like global index funds, global ETFs and stuff like that. So they're called exchange traded funds. You're essentially you're essentially owning part of the world economy growth. So if the global economy is growing by 2%, you are taking part in that growth, and that's how you kind of think about it over the long term. So it's for me, investing is one of my favorite parts of personal finance, and I really advocate for it, again, because not that many people invest. They're very again shy. I think I said 96%, right?
You did, yeah.
I said 96%. Let me actually double clarify. That is actually, you know what, no 94%. So it's not far. So 6% of the population are investing. So basically in the UK we have so what we have is individual savings account, right? So these are basically accounts where you essentially you don't get taxed on your profits or your interest, right? You don't get taxed on it, and you have a threshold every tax year, so you can put into these accounts about 20,000 every tax year, and a lot of people ain't taking advantage of it. So in total in the UK, so the UK population about 68 million, 22 million people in the UK have an ISA, one of these individual savings accounts. So it means about 60% of people are
not taking advantage of it.
Might be paying tax on their savings. They are not taking advantage of investing potentially, because if they don't have a stocks and shares ISA, then it's likely they're not potentially not investing. And then within that 22 million, right, it's about 3.9 million hold a stocks and shares ISA, right? So that's about 6% of the population, which in my opinion, that's poor.
That's very bad.
6% of people, you're telling me, are investing in a stocks and shares ISA out of the UK. So what's the other 94% of people doing?
Do you think it's due to lack of education?
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Definitely.
Wow.
Definitely.
Well, we're happy that podcasts like yours exist.
Yes, I mean, we need to close the gap, because if you think about a lot of, we talk, and I want to try and talk more about it on the podcast, but we talk about, the wealth gap and all these things. The wealth gap is because of that, of investing, right? So I saw something like, I hope you don't mind, but
Go for it.
right now the election just happened, Trump's just happened, and I literally saw an article where it says it was something along the lines of supporters of Trump, wealthy supporters of Trump, their net worth has increased by X billions, right? And that net worth being increased by X billions is because they invested in the stock market. That's why, right? So this is how the wealth gap happens. If you are not investing, right, and the wealthiest are investing,
you're missing out.
It's very hard to beat that. It's very hard to beat, because they're not having to work harder. They're still making an income in a way where, in terms of their businesses generating income, they're working for the income, but then some of their other income is working for itself. So it's very hard you can't beat something that's automated, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you have to kind of see it. So that's why the wealth gap keeps on getting bigger, because of the lack of financial literacy, and because people aren't investing and not taking the opportunity to invest in the stock market. So yeah, that was one of the tips from Andrew, and that's what I've really been advocating really for. So
that's some great tips in terms of wealth creation and personal finance. I really do appreciate that. I think it's an interesting one, because I think there is a lot of people who aren't really getting educated, And there's a lot of people who probably don't know where to start and think that it's rocket science to invest or to build wealth, or even things like personal finance. I think some people just aren't good at it, or they just don't have access to the education. There's lack of financial education out there. But I think podcasts like yours are really important to help people
Thank you.
become aware of all of this. And I think it's really, I think, you know, this is why finance podcasts are really taken off, because I think everyone's becoming more conscious of spending their money, investing, and what's happening in the economy, and they want to get more out of it. I think we can now see that people want to live certain lifestyles, and wealth creation and personal finances is key to that. Cool. Now, I mean, those are really good examples. Thanks for that. We'll probably come back and get more from your personal experience.
I've got more people. Don't worry.
Yeah,
I've noted down lots of people.
Cool. We'll come back to that. Let's take a little diversion. Let's go to you. So, what is it that prompted you to start this podcast? Like, what is it regarding those three areas: wealth, personal finance, and running a business? Prompted you to start this podcast? Tell me a bit about that journey.
Yeah, so for me, so I left uni with a little bit of debt. It wasn't a crazy amount, you know. I always tell this story to guests that come on the podcast, but so I left with about £500, you know, overdraft debt.
Okay.
What happened was that during my time at university, I used the £500. I didn't keep the account active, so they closed the account, right? So I'm keeping the long story short. So they closed the account, and because basically I was breaking their terms and conditions. I was supposed to put my student loan in there. I was supposed to keep their account active. I wasn't doing that, so they say, therefore, we're going to close the account, and now you're in default. Wow. I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. You're a student, you don't really care. Funny thing is, the funny parallel was I was working at a phone shop as well, where I was dealing with people with credit, but not from a point of view like I understood like what your credit score was. I just knew that, okay, if you can't get a phone, you got bad credit. If you can, you got good credit. But for me, because credit at that point didn't really matter.
I know, right? Student.
I was like, I don't care. What do I need to know this for, right? It only mattered when post-university I wanted to get a Sony tablet, went to the shop, failed the credit check, and that embarrassment kind of led me to, okay, so you need to change your way. But funny enough, I was already following like money related content. So at that time, there was no Instagram pages, of course. There was no YouTube channels talking about this. It was the Motley Fool. I was subscribed to Motley Fool for some reason. I think I've always been interested in making money. And you know, for me, it's really because I didn't really have much growing up. So I think for me, there was always that interest of, you know, I want to make money. So Motley Fool and Money Saving Expert. Actually, I was signed up when it was called Martin's Money. I was signed up. I'm one of the early people. Wow, everybody now is like Money Saving Expert. I was when it was Martin's Money. Yeah, so I've been signed up to Martin for a long time, and yeah, I just picked up tips here and there. So, you know, how to better save, you know, how to kind of improve your credit score, and really I focused on paying off the debt repayment plan. Basically, I was putting a repayment plan for that £500 overdraft. So focus on repaying it. It didn't take me long. I think it took me a few years. I wasn't paying like much of it. And then I set myself a goal of I want to buy a property, right? So I saved up enough deposit. I think it took me like 6-7 years to do that. Bought a property, and then for me that was a real 180. I was like, okay, you're a guy that came from, you know, you were a little bit of debt, poor credit, and now you've able to manage to save enough, you know, deposit for, you know, a property, and you're quite good in terms of managing your money. So at that point I was like, okay, I want to start a side hustle. And for me, for some reason, teaching people about personal finance just kept sticking out. I wrote a list of it, like selling things online, but teaching people about personal finance really stuck out to me. So I decided, you know what, let me create a YouTube channel. That was the inception of Savvy Wallet. I had loads of names, but everybody's like, yeah, Savvy Wallet is dope. That's the one. Like, okay, cool. We're gonna go with Savvy Wallet. And I almost wasn't gonna post my first video, but I remember my friends at work. I was working at KPMG at this point. I just remember them saying to me, "No, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. Like, it's a good idea. Do it." And yeah, we posted my first It's a 5-minute video, but that took me hours. I
Really?
was sweating.
Wow,
I was
wow,
wearing
wow.
a turtleneck.
Oh
Oh my
my
God, I was
gosh.
so nervous. Like it was,
Really?
yeah, I was mad
Wow,
nervous. I
wow,
was so
wow, wow,
nervous.
wow, wow.
It was crazy. But yeah, that was the beginning of Savvy Wallet. To
Wow,
be
that
honest,
was
yeah.
it. You had like your peers or your work colleagues saying, "Do it, do it, do it," and then you eventually did it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Wow,
mean, I wanted
wow,
to
wow,
do it and then
wow.
I almost backed out. You know, when you got a lot of energy to do something, but when it comes to actually execute, that's where people really struggle executing. So I'm fortunate that I had that support around me, of people telling me to do it. You know, my friends, my wife, family, like do it, go
It
out. Why not do it?
it
Right? It's
does help.
important.
It does help. I remember when I dropped the first episode of The Sound of a Cloud in January 2020 in a Ghanaian community platform. The feedback I got gave me the momentum to go to episode 2 and so on and so forth. So I think it's really, 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 really important.
Yeah.
You know, that you have people behind you that are encouraging you to
Yeah.
go ahead with whatever it is that you're trying to do.
I agree. I think you definitely need that support. You definitely need, you know what it is, right? I think getting started, I know it's a cliche, but it's true. Because once you get started, it's just momentum taking you. There are two, okay, if I'm going to be very honest. From a podcasting point of view, there are two, let me call them kind of pitfalls, things that you got to kind of be aware of. First is I think it can be a bit tough getting started. Like you got a buzz, I want to start a podcast, and you have a lot of energy towards it. But then when it comes to doing the first episode, that's your first hurdle of, oh, am I really sure? What if it
Yeah.
goes wrong? What's the
Yeah.
people? Because that was all the thoughts I had in my head, right? Like, what's if people don't like it? Oh, I don't want to put myself on the internet.
Yeah.
All of these kind of things, all of these negative thoughts. That's the first one that you have to overcome. The second one you have to overcome is after all the enthusiasm dies. Because once you get over that part, you're mad excited. Oh yeah, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
You 2, 3, 4, and then when it now turns into this is what you have to consistently do on whatever cadence it is, whether it's 1 week, 2 weeks, a year, no, sorry, a year, sorry, a month, or
Yeah.
however, whatever cadence you're doing
Yes.
bi-weekly. When it needs to get into that process of doing that, that's the second hurdle you need to really get past, because that's where it's really tough, right?
Yeah.
Because again, there's going to be some weeks you're not motivated, and at that point motivation for me is not important. It's like for you it's getting into the mind frame of it's got to be done. For me, I'd say to people, I don't need to be motivated. It's coming out Monday. That's what I say to people.
Yeah.
It's coming out.
Come rain or
right?
shine. It's a week. It's
It's
a
coming
weekly
out.
show.
It's,
Come rain or
do you know what I
shine. It's a
mean?
weekly show, for you, isn't
People
it?
are locked in. People are expecting it. That's my duty, right? People show up for me, so I'll show up for them, right? And you know what I mean? You know what the hardest part of that was, right? For
What's
me,
the hardest part for you?
that hardest part was when I was first starting, when I was getting like 5 people listening. But you know what? Yeah, I had to get myself out of that mindset very quick, where it was like, even if it's 5 people, that's still 5 people listening to you.
It is.
That decided that they want to give up their day and time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't think, oh yeah, okay, when it's 100, then I'm gonna decide to show up, because that's the wrong attitude. You won't do that, right? You do it when it's 1, you do it when it's 2, you do it when it's 100. That's how it is. You build in the habits. If you're not gonna just switch it on and be like, okay, now it's gonna be 100, right? It doesn't work like that. And also, you will never get to 100 because you didn't put in the right habits, you didn't put in the right attitudes, you didn't put in the right processes. So you would never get to 100 anyway. True. Right? If it was sporadic, right? If you were doing, let's say, 1 episode a year,
yeah,
you got to get to 100 listeners.
Yeah.
Immediately, no. So I think all of these things are like steps. I think you have to kind of see them as steps. And sorry, I've kind of gone on a tangent, but I just wanted to kind of say that, because I think I'm quite, because of the experiences I've gone through, I haven't talked so much about it. I can kind of say, okay, I know what it takes, but I also want people to be prepared for, yes, this stuff is fun, is exciting, but there are going to be times where you're just going to have to be able to go over the hurdle and get yourself into a frame of mind where you're like, this needs to be done. Whether I like it or not, it needs to be done. That's how you have to think. It's not like, oh, I'm not feeling it today, so I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, when it comes to podcasting, and I think I think some of these principles that you've just shared, they can be applied to lots of different things. So whether it's wealth creation, running a business, or personal finance, there's steps to this, and there's patience required, and there's longevity required. And I say with podcasting, for example, that's one example. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon.
Yeah,
you have to. If you're seeing it as a sprint, is relying on enthusiasm from other people to cheer you on.
Yeah.
But once you start losing energy, are you going to continue to run? Are you going to continue to persist to the finish line? Or are you going to just walk away because you haven't seen, the views or the downloads that you want? So I totally agree. And, congrats to you. I know,
thank you.
I think maybe some months back, you did an episode talking about your 100th episode and lessons that you learned through doing your 100 episodes. And I think it's really important for people that want to maybe start podcasts, whether they want to use that as a vehicle for wealth creation or, running a business or whatever it is. These tips that you shared are really, really, really important. Honestly, they really are important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to kind of continue on, and I want to discuss your personal experiences in terms of building wealth and, personal finance, like your personal tips. And then we'll probably kind of come back to some of the guests that you've interviewed. Could you share some of your personal tips? I know so far you've spoken about ETFs, you've spoken about stocks and things like that. Are there any other from your personal experience, tips that you want to give to the audience in terms of personal finance? I think you've spoken about wealth.
Yeah, where I'm going a little bit more, and I'm going to be talking a bit more with like therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists about this. I think it's understanding who you are and what kind of person you are. I think in regards to money, I think you have to understand how you kind of feel around that, because for example, I could say to you right now, do budget, I don't know, eat beans on toast every day, and you're like, no, I can't do that, right? So I would say, I think you have to understand who you are, what kind of person you are, right? Like, figure out high level. Is it easy for you to budget? Is it easy for you to be a spender? For me, I was a spender, right? So I knew, because I'm a spender, I need to kind of put in guardrails to prevent me from spending. So one of those guardrails, for example, is, okay, I put a certain amount of money in my account. The rest goes into a savings account, or it goes into another bank, for example, right? So let's say I have two banks, right? Maybe bank A is where my salary goes in. Bank B is where like maybe my spending money goes for the month. So it's about thinking about who you are and then putting in the potential kind of guardrail. So yeah, for me, again, that was one of the spending kind of things that I kind of did. Yeah, I do. I've got loads of tips things I want to say, but what I want to do is I want to be mindful that, again, personal finance is personal, right? So I always want to say to people, whenever I'm saying what I'm saying, you also got to figure out what works for you and what doesn't, because it doesn't work holistically for everybody, right? So for example, I was speaking to somebody 2 days ago, right? And they were like to me, I'm not doing that budgeting lifestyle. Like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to work my job and I'm going to have a business because I like the lifestyle. When I say they're not saying that they're going to budget, they do budget, but they're saying that they don't want to lower their expenses. So because they don't want to lower their expenses, they'd rather just make more money, right? So figure out, are you that type of person? Are you the type of person like, you know what, like I like that high lifestyle, but I'm willing to work way more. I'm willing to have a side hustle. I'm willing to do whatever to finance that and more, right? I think the most important thing is that, you always do have a surplus, right? I think that's like at a high level. You need to always have a surplus, because that surplus is what's going to enable you to build wealth, right? So for me, right, on months where it's not hectic and I'm not traveling for weddings or, holidays and stuff like that, for me, I like to invest. I mean, it's no secret. I like to invest, right? And I think that's where you really build wealth, right? I think there's two sort of avenues where you build wealth, right? It's really, if you're not somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, then your avenue is going to be in the stock market, right? Stock market or property, for example, or crypto, if you're if you're risky. Those are going to be your avenues in terms of building wealth if you don't want to be an entrepreneur and you're happy, at 9 to 5. But you need to ensure that there's enough surplus that you can use, right, to invest in these things, right? Now, if you want to create wealth, not the stock market, not the property route, then yeah, it's got to be entrepreneur, right? That's another route for you to potentially create wealth. I technically, I'm kind of doing both, right? I've got my 9 to 5, I've got my business in terms of the podcast, and I'm still investing, so I'm doing both, right? And I think you could do both. I think both is good because then it means you accelerate, right, as well, right? You got the one that's a bit more long term, maybe that takes care of you, I don't know, between 40 and 60, and then maybe the wealth you rapidly create now, takes you up to 40. I don't know. You have to kind of figure that out for yourself. So I think really, again, it's really understanding who you are, and then from that, always ensuring that you understand how to kind of manage your finances, right? I think it's very important. People don't like the word budget. There's loads of different ways you can call it. It doesn't have to be a budget. You can call it a plan. You can call it whatever you want. I think what's important is that you have an eye on what's coming in and what's going out, and you make sure there's a surplus for you to put that to work. And what's crazy is the surplus also doesn't have to be put into the stock market. It could also be used to start a business, right? Or used to quit your job to start a business, right? So doing that just gives you the flexibility. That's what you have to see. Having a surplus gives you the flexibility. You have to see it in that kind of way. So yeah, for me, it's really mindset, knowing who you are. If I was to number it, I think really understanding who you are. Are you a spender? Are you naturally a saver, right? Are you doing these things do you have visibility of your finances? If you don't, okay, get visibility of your finances. Okay, cool, you've got visibility of your finances. Are you, do you have a surplus, right? Are you making more than you're spending? Cool, okay, what are you doing with the surplus, right? And that's how I think if you structure it in that way, you're gonna be able to kind of build wealth. And that's how I think about it. Obviously, there are other things you can do. There's loads of other things. We've got pensions as well that I would say, and I'll briefly mention it because when I was young, I didn't really take it seriously. But a lot of companies these days are doing company matches. So that's another a pension is wealth, by the way. I mean, the government, I can't say too much because I haven't read it in depth, but the government are going to start going after people's pensions because you can also pass that on as well. It is wealth. So if a company is saying they will match up to 5% of your salary, that's 5% they're giving you for free. So look out for a lot of these free things. A lot of things I did, right? And again, now the more I'm doing it, I'm remembering. I just took advantage of all the free money that was out there. So when I say for my deposit, lifetime ISA, I took advantage of that. It was that I got an extra $3,000. That's free money.
Yeah.
Like, why not? Right? Who doesn't want free money? So I was taking advantage of all of these things. I lived in a housing association building, which gave 20% off. I just was using the system. You have to use the system, but also, right, the system won't tell you about these things. Of course, nobody, this it was intermediate rent. Nobody told me about it. I found it by accident. I was like, oh my God, this is great.
By accident, okay.
Use that. I was like, yeah, well, 20% off the private rent. Okay, cool. I can afford to live on my own. It's a bit cheaper than what it would be normal. Okay, when I say for mortgage deposit, okay, free money here. Do you get what I mean? So I think it's taking advantage of that pension. Got my employer paying into my pension. So it's taking advantage of all of these things, I think, as well. It's important.
I mean, these are more than fantastic tips. These are great tips for at least even a beginner. Honestly, these are fantastic. Thanks for sharing this, Ato. And I think all of these tips, I think for someone to take them on is really going to do a lot for them, honestly.
Yeah, I hope so,
Yeah, but I think I also want to mention that, of course, you're not a financial advisor.
I'm not. Yes, I'm not a financial advisor. Let's make sure that. So this is no advice. This is, I wouldn't even say guidance. This is us just talking.
Yeah,
right?
we're just talking.
Exactly. I would always say, do your own research, especially when it comes to, whether it's investing, pensions, accounts, all of that stuff. Always do your own research. That's why I say personal finance is personal. Just understand again at a high level who you are, and then use podcasts like this to guide you to find your way, but always make sure it's personalized to you. This is more information. This is information you're talking about. So it's no different to like if I saw if I wanted to invest in a global fund and it had they normally have a fact sheet and it tells you, okay, this global fund's invest in this, and that. You know, that's what this is. This is just pure information.
Mm-hmm.
We're not telling you to act on it. You kind of just use it to figure out what you need to do.
That's fantastic, honestly. Wow. I think there's a lot of people can take from that. And I think some of the books and some of the things that you mentioned, we will try and link it down in the description. So you guys can go check out some of this stuff. And of course, this podcast. I want to kind of go through maybe one other guest that you've had on that you've learned something from. Is there one that you can share?
Yeah, you know what? I would say I could share all 145.
Yeah.
If any of my guests are listening,
we wish we can.
If any of my guests are listening, I appreciate you all. You know, I appreciate you all. And this, right, me sharing this is not favoritism. I just want to make that clear that they've all been great, right?
Yeah.
I'm just, maybe it's recency bias because you know, it's easier for me to think of the most recent ones. Yeah. But actually, you know what? I'll speak about somebody who's actually gone in. Franklin, his episode was brilliant, right?
Yes, yeah.
And what I really liked about that conversation, what I kind of learned, and I think what many people say that they kind of learned from that conversation is, I think what he was trying to get across was that, you know, if you want money, it is out there, right? That's exactly what he was saying in the episode, right? And really, for you to get that, you just need to make sure that you're in the arena where that money is circulating, right? So he's always thinking about being, okay, is this a sector or career, or, you know, that has money in it, that is abundant with money. That's how you kind of have to think about it. And also, you don't necessarily need to be at the top of the ladder. What he was saying basically is that if you think about any kind of industry, any kind of sector, people at the top of those sectors are wealthy, like crazy amount. Okay, for example, right, like McDonald's, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I ain't gonna work at McDonald's, right? But the CEO of McDonald's is probably making millions.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Exactly, honestly. Right? So money's out there, right? At the end of the day, right? It's about thinking about what sector you're in, where are you on that ladder, and you don't necessarily need to be at the top, because even the people at the middle, if it's a sector where there's a lot of money, let's say for example like AI, cybersecurity, even if you're mid-level, you could be getting 6 figures. For sure. For sure. For example, I work in tech, right? As I said, I was a tech consultant.
You did, yeah.
So in technology, software engineers, yeah, a lot of them get 6 figures, 150, 140 a year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, some of them can get more if we include like where you have stock options and stuff like that. So it's about being in, and that's just from a 9 to 5 point of view, not even a business. It's just about being in the arena. If you really want money, it's out there, basically. So that's what I kind of learned from him, thinking a lot about that and trying to, it's almost like cutting loose ends. If this arena is dry of money, let's leave that and let's go to arena like technology, AI, you know, some maybe green energy in the future is probably going to be,
sustainability.
You know, sustainability. That's probably going to be huge amounts of money, right? That's how you have to kind of think and position yourself, whether it's a business or whether it's a 9 to 5. The other thing that we spoke about that I think is very important for people to hear is about maintaining a certain level. So for example, a lot of people want to be millionaires, right? But let's say you had $1 million in your account. Cool. Yeah, you're a millionaire, but you're not going to live a millionaire lifestyle, because if you lived a millionaire lifestyle, you'll be broke in a year.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So it's all relative.
Exactly. So a lot of people don't think about this. They think about the end goal, but they don't think about the other side of how do you actually instead of thinking about a number, think about the lifestyle.
Yeah.
What lifestyle do you want? Okay, I want a 2,000 this is sounding great. I want a $5,000 a month lifestyle, where that in terms of expenses, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to be able to, let's say, sustain that without any issues, let's say 5 to 10 years. Again, not financial advice. I'm just giving numbers out here as an example, right? Let's say that's something you want to be able to sustain over 5 to 10 years, right? How much do you need to sustain it? That's how you should be thinking.
True.
Not the other way around of I just want some random figure of 10 million. Because it's likely when you get to the million, okay, let me buy the 500k house or 600k house. Depends on where you live in London. Some houses are a million.
True.
You might just buy it and you've got nothing.
It's gone.
Oh, I want the expensive car. And then before you know, oh, damn,
you
what's happened?
Engineer it, don't you?
Exactly. A lot of people don't think of the other side. It's always I need to get there. Okay, when you get there, let's say we gave you $1 million now. What's the lifestyle like?
Oh, you're going to increase that lifestyle, or are you going to maintain?
People are not going to live a 10k lifestyle at $1 million. Yeah. They're going to try and live $1 million lifestyle at $1 million. That's what happens.
Yeah, it's foolishness. I mean, I just had a millionaire sit in your seat not too long ago. And when you speak to him, when you see the lifestyle he lives, he doesn't look like he's blowing that money. He looks like he's very savvy, no pun intended of your podcast, with his money, you know? So I think it really does come down to the mindset. Yeah. Because that's one thing he talked about, the mindset, that, you know, you can get to a certain amount of money, but you have to have the mindset to be able to manage and leverage it. Exactly. And not just to blow it and spend. Exactly. It's very important. It's very, very important. Very, very important indeed. I do agree with you. Now, this has been fantastic. There's a lot of tips that you've given to our audience, and I think they can get a lot from this. I want to discuss, before we wrap up, I want to discuss some myths that people have, because I remember watching your appearance on Pennies to Pounds podcast. Okay, yes. And they were discussing some myths. Okay. So could you tell us? I don't remember the myths though. Were there any myths that you know that people have about investing or personal finance? Are there any myths that you have in your mind? Yeah. So I think people think that you have to be rich to invest. You can invest from £1, so you don't need to. I think people have that. I think people think that because before, when you used to invest, you did have to have a certain amount, but now with the advent of apps out there, has brought the I'll say the entry criteria down, so you don't no longer need a lot of money to invest. You can start investing from as little as £1. Again, in terms of investing, a lot of people see it as, let's say, maybe a scam, or it's risky. Yes, there's an element of risk in investing, but if you're investing in something that's well diversified, especially if you're a beginner, right? Again, there's lots of literature around this. We talked about how to own global index funds. If you're investing in something like that as a beginner, low cost, it's automated, and you do it over the long term. When we say long term, we don't mean a year. We mean minimum 5 years, ideally 10, 15 years. When you do it over that time, it's unlikely you'll lose money. Actually, as you invest longer, the likelihood of you losing money it kind of reduces in a way, right? Again, let me caveat this by, I'm not talking about just individual stocks, that's different. I'm talking about just generally, if you were to invest in the global economy has grown over time, right? Yes, it's gone down, but overall it's increased. In terms of our GDP, is increased over the year. So yeah, people have that myth as well. Budgeting, again, call it whatever you want. You can call it a plan. Let's say planning. People think planning means that you live a restrictive lifestyle. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be exciting. That's not true. Having a plan just means you have an understanding. That's how you have to see it. It's an understanding of what comes in, what comes out. And the reason why you want to have that understanding is, I'll give you an example actually. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. I think it's great. If anybody steals it, it came from me, because this is a real story. Go on. So I sold my car. I had a Renault Clio, right, at university. I got it in cash. Yeah. The person gave it to me in a bag. It was about £800 in a bag. Yeah. Right. Accepted it, whatever. I got home, I put it up in the cupboard, left it there. And then whenever I went out, I would just take out from it. If I wanted to go out and eat, I would just take out from it. However, I never knew how much was left.
I was just taking out, right? Until one day I went there, oh, it's empty. That's how you have to see planning. It's exactly like that, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have any visibility of you probably know what's coming in, but if you don't have any visibility of what's coming out, you could just be in serious debt. You could just be zero and you don't know why, right? That's how you have to see it. Use that analogy to understand why it's important. Now, if I had maybe every week, I said to myself, okay, Ato, every week you're going to check, or every day, let's say every day you're going to check how much is left. Maybe I would have reduced my spending. Maybe I would have been like, actually, I'm not going out tonight. Or maybe I should put this in a bank. There would have been an intervention, right? I think when you have the visibility, there's an intervention. Without that, there was none. I just kept on drawing until it was empty, right? So that's the analogy that I would like to use to paint that picture of why you need to be able to plan your finances, because it really will allow you to intervene when you need to.
Absolutely. I think, having an idea of a cash flow forecast, your profit and loss, whatever it is, just the basics, balance sheet. I think just having those basics, not necessarily saying you have to have a business, but just approaching it in that way, you can be more savvy about how you go about using your money, saving your money and spending your money and investing your money as well. Ato, it's been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too. It's been great finally had you on the podcast. Any final tips you want to give to the audience, a book that you want to recommend, and any announcements, please go ahead, and where people can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. I would just say to people listening to this, money can be overwhelming, personal finance can be overwhelming, but just take it slow. Just take it in baby steps. That's how I started. I took it in baby steps. You don't have to try and learn everything straight away. I would say try to learn the basics. So understand how to plan your finances in terms of, budgeting. Again, you don't have to use the word budgeting. Find a word that's favorable for you. Set a date. So a lot of people have had come on the podcast and say, like, have a money date, with your money. It's up to you if you want to do that or not, right? But just set something where you're able to do it consistently. So if it's once a month and that's okay for you, if you feel like you spend too much, maybe you want to do it once a week. And then see if you could do that with somebody you trust that can hold you accountable, where you can both kind of do it. It's not easy, right? Talking about money is not easy. I'm very comfortable. So I also want to just caveat, although I'm comfortable, I also understand it's a very difficult conversation to have with people. Because it's very personal, right? Yes. Money for some reason is very personal with people. So it's I understand that, right? I definitely understand that. So I'll say just take it very slow, understand the basics, first, how to budget. Okay, you got your surplus. Okay, figure out how to, save every month, right? And things like that. And then once you're quite comfortable with that, okay, let's start investing, but maybe we invest very little, maybe just £10 a month. You're very comfortable with that. You're very comfortable with your education. Then you kind of move. So think of it like steps of a ladder, very, very similar to like Money Ladder, which is actually a great book that I would say that you should definitely, so from Franklin Asante, you should definitely check that out.
We'll link that below.
Check out definitely How to Own the World. That's also very, very great book. Teaches you about investing and how to own the world as well. So yeah, I would just say baby steps. That's my tip. If people want to obviously check out the podcast, they can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Savvy Wallet Podcasts, or if you just type Savvy Wallet, you should be able to find it.
Ato, thank you so much.
Welcome.
You've been a great guest.
Thank you.
There you have it, guys. Ato from the Savvy Wallet Podcast. We'll leave all the links in the description below, or head over to thesoundofthecrowd.com/Ato, that's A2O, for all of the tips, nuggets, links, and references from today's show. And that's it for today's episode, guys. We'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.